Hello, everyone. We are just getting started with another round of Promptcraft 1, an exploration into generative media. Hi, everyone. This is Evo, coming to you today from Oakland, California. And I'm going to go ahead and remove myself from this stream. And we are going to get started with another round of the Realitycraft workshop. This is Promptcraft 1. So we are going to be looking today at V4 in Midjourney, and we are going to be looking at the vision and revision process and how this works when you are creating new types of art. I hope you are hearing me out there today. We are recording this session for those who have not been able to make one of the live sessions but wanted to join us. Thank you and welcome. I hope that you've been able to make one of these sessions, as we are going to make these sessions available on YouTube down the line. So thank you and welcome. I can see that we are now live. So this is an ongoing series of workshops on Promptcraft and how we can use these tools effectively together. We're going to be going through an interactive webinar, and there will be an opportunity for those of you who want to ask questions to do so through the comments. So you can test that out right now. You can send a comment to me, and we'll see if we can make those questions and ideas show up in the stream today. It's great to see you all here. I see that we do have some viewers. Again, this is the first version of Promptcraft 1. Now, we have offered this workshop a few times, and I'm going to turn down our music just a little bit more because we don't need that at this stage. This workshop takes us through a number of generative art tools, as well as the beginning landscapes of other types of media. So this is a very early stage, let's call it an intro level, to what is known as prompt engineering. This is not an engineering course. However, this is really for creators and people who may not be engineers by trade, but are trying to understand how generative art tools and generative media tools work. This is going to go into the language of Promptcraft and also into the tools themselves. Especially today, we're going to be looking at Midjourney. So we're going to explore what is Promptcraft and how we form a prompt for generative tools, getting started and what that looks like when you are trying to jump into these tools for the first time. We're going to talk a little bit about lighting styles and other types of language that you can introduce into your prompts. We are going to look at a handful of free online resources and tools that you can consider using. And then we're going to get into some of those topics of how to modify and improve what you're getting. That can include parameters, weights and measures, how to use image prompts, stable diffusion, and other types of generative tools outside of Midjourney. And then we're going to talk a little bit about ChatGPT and some of the text generators out there as well. So we are going to have some time for questions today. And if you have specific questions or things you're working on, feel free to go ahead and send those in the chat line, and I will do my best to get to them as we go today. So again, my name is Evo Heyning. I am a creator, producer. I have worked in technology, media, and relatively in the spaces of social impact that include public interactive design for the last 25 years. And so when we're doing a process of creative design or world building, I often enjoy taking people through the steps of this process that help you envision the type of world you want to live in. So much of the media that has come at us throughout our lives tends to be pretty dark or dystopian. So I want you in this opportunity zone that we have together to really think about how your choices, your actions, your decisions today might affect others down the line, and how you can infuse that into your creative work, whatever that might be. So I'm excited to hear all of your thoughts. And if any of you are looking to participate in today's session, I know some of you are in the Facebook group for Realitycraft, which you are welcome to join as a workshop attendee. And there is a conversation zone there for ongoing experiments. So just to preface this entire body of work, Realitycraft is a physical space. I am here in Oakland, California today. It is also a process. It is a game that is in refinement. A design lab here physically is the anchoring point for that, but we are also engaged in generative work all over the world. And many of you are now a part of that process through experimentation or through groups like we have on Facebook, Meta, Discord, and elsewhere. So we are combining the physical art and craft of what it means to make something with the digital, with the algorithmic. And so these are combinations of tools that are mostly new to us, unless you've worked in something like VFX or animation, you may not be super familiar with how to work with procedural assets, for example, in gaming. So these are the types of things that we are going to unpack and discover together. But don't worry, you don't have to be a hardcore technologist to appreciate or use any of these things. We're going to look at some web tools that make these kinds of ideas very easy to grasp and easy to play with. So what we're discussing today, and I apologize, y'all, I have a bit of a cold, and so you're going to hear that in my voice. We are here today exploring the concepts of Promptcraft, specifically the language and the process we go through to realize and design generative creative works. Now, this includes image generators, as we've discussed, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, for example. But this also includes a wide variety of other types of media. So that's video, that is 3D assets, that includes the beginnings of world building. And when we are forming a prompt, the language of it has a unique grammar, syntax. It also includes more than just words. So we're going to talk about how images fit in. We're also going to talk about numbers, parameters, and we're going to talk a little bit about the other ways that you can prompt, for example, emoji in some tools as well. So we are going to have some conversations about the different aspects and elements of a prompt. And we're going to start by exploring what are those elements and how do we put them together effectively. So a prompt is a series of words, numbers, and other characters that express an idea that can be generated. That's a simple definition of what we are putting in when we query Stable Diffusion or Midjourney or ChatGPT. That text, that prompt, can include characters that speak to perhaps all of these elements, or maybe a choice of some of them, right? So your content type might include a pretty wide variety of things. That might include, let's say you're in an image generator and you're trying to make a poster. So you'll say a poster. Maybe you're trying to make pages for a coloring book. So you might say coloring book. Description in this case is the scene descriptor. What is it you are trying to ask for it to illustrate, paint, create? That is where you want your adjectives and your nouns along with any essential verbs, right? So that can take any number of forms, and we're going to Mad Lib that out just a little bit, but I want you to just kind of see where that fits in. All right, the third piece of this is style. And style takes different forms depending on whether we're talking about art and images or we're talking about writing. And so we're going to explore both of those today. But style words might include a school of art, or it might include a way of writing, for example. Composition. This is very useful when we're talking about image generators and we're talking about things like stage direction or trying to get to a concept design that you want to produce for something later. The composition words that we might be using would be anything that you could pull from a theater script. For example, any type of script is going to have those kinds of details for the cinematographer or the photographer to use. That kind of information is very useful in image generation. And then finally, parameters. And parameters we use at the end, specifically in Midjourney. But we do use them in many different types of prompts, not just in Midjourney. It's used across the board in order to constrain and help define what types of generations come out. And there are lots of different types of parameters depending on what we're talking about. That might include things like chaos. How much, how true are we to the original image that was provided? Or parameters might also include things about quality or aspect ratio as well. So we're going to explore a little bit about Stable Diffusion and Midjourney as a comparison. Now, you can choose to use either of these for this workshop. We are going to use both in different versions. This on the left is Stable Diffusion. On the right, this is Midjourney. In this case, I image prompted from the exact same image, which was from an illustrated book from 1902. And what I asked for in terms of an Art Nouveau art concept, you can see we're very faithfully created and recreated, generated in this case. But there are fundamental differences to how that was depicted. Every version of a generator is going to do something different. So Stable Diffusion 2.0 is going to be different than 1.5, and you're going to get different results. Midjourney version 3 is going to give you a more sort of abstract, painterly, beautiful concept. Version 4 might give you something more photorealistic, as you see here. So we're going to talk a little bit about versions, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the tools more broadly. If you have not jumped into either of these tools yet, you can get started by any of these methods. Midjourney lets you get started for free, but will charge you pretty quickly. I think you get 25 images or something along those lines. So you can go to midjourney.com and get started for free, but keep in mind that you are going to be limited to a certain number of generations total. If you've reached your limit in what you want to do in Midjourney and you're not going to pay for that today, you can also go to some of these websites, Diffusionland, which will let you compare more than one tool. For example, you could compare Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, these kinds of things. And beta.dreamstudio.ai, which is a very useful web version of Stability. Stability is the company which supports Stable Diffusion. Now, Stable Diffusion is an open source endeavor. It includes many products that are using that open source code in ways that may or may not be open source or easy or affordable. So I just want that to be prefaced that some of these tools are free. Some of these tools are free for now. Some of them you will need to pay for, and you need to make those own decisions for what you're trying to do today. So keep in mind that if you're trying to get toward photorealism, it may be easier to get highly realistic human characters, either in Midjourney or in a version of Stable Diffusion known as Automatic 1111. Now, these tools all have their own rules in terms of how you can use them. And we're going to talk a little bit about the sort of nuances around that. And I see that we've had some questions about some of the commands in Midjourney, so we can talk through that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of those legal questions that have been coming up. You know, is this copyrightable? How do I use it? What are the rules around using it? So Midjourney is a company. They are, and if that URL is broken, let me go ahead and take a look, because it may be that they have moved their URL. And I'm noticing not just Dream Studio, but a handful of companies are moving their tools around pretty quickly. So you don't even need to type beta. You might be able just to type dreamstudio.ai. And I'll go ahead and put that in a banner for you to make that super simple. But it seems to be working on this end. You can probably drop the beta and just type dreamstudio.ai. So if you're not interested in using Midjourney today, but you want to try an alternate version, that is one. There are many, many versions of image generators at this point. And we're going to talk a little bit about those options. So whether you're in Stable Diffusion or Dolly or Midjourney, all of those tools are going to give you certain types of constraints. They're also going to give you certain types of abilities. And you want to think about how much control do you want, and where are you going to be able to generate the type of work that you need to do in order for your work to be effective. Now, Midjourney is a company where you can pay for $30 a month to do unlimited generation. As long as you are not making a ton of money off of that content, that's fine, and you don't need to sort of cut them in on it. However, those rules are going to change. And right now, the sort of vagueness around what does it mean to participate with Midjourney in profit is still being determined. So I will let you know. This is obviously an ongoing experiment. All of these companies are still trying to sort out how they're going to maintain sort of mutual copyright attribution and management of mutually created assets. This also includes whether there will be opt-in or opt-out options for other creators in the future. All of these are fascinating topics. We do discuss these in a handful of other groups related to AI and ethics, including XR Guild. And I would encourage you to participate in those conversations. Sometimes it is easier to participate in those conversations in person and not through message boards or in places like Facebook, where it tends to be a little bit difficult to engage. So we're going to start with Midjourney, and I'm going to get you through doing a few commands and prompts. I'm going to switch over to a different screen, and I need to just take a moment here to do this. Let me make sure that my screen is sharing properly from Discord. And then what I'm going to be doing with you today is kind of taking you inside my conversation with the Discord bot. Now, many of you have found that Midjourney is very noisy if you were in the traditional channel for Midjourney. The way around that is to DM with the Discord Midjourney bot. And that is how I tend to manage my content in a single channel, in a place where I can do it and make sense, but it isn't as public at the end of the day, right? It becomes a little bit more managed and a little less difficult for me to not feel overwhelmed by. So I am in a channel with the Discord bot here. I'm going to actually make my screen size a little bit bigger. Because I feel like that might make it easier to see what we're doing here. But you can see this is the Midjourney bot that I am having this conversation with in the browser on Discord. And I'm going to go back in my thread a little bit, and you're going to see a handful of different prompts and how I've organized those. And then we're going to talk through some of those questions, not just how to start a prompt, but then how to adjust your settings and things like that. So let me make sure everything is working smoothly. It looks like we are there. When I am starting a prompt, I go to this bottom command line in Discord. That is where I'm typing, and that is where all of my input needs to be in order for the Discord bot to hear me. So I type imagine, and you can see it came up automatically as imagine prompt. And that's exactly what I want. I want to enter a handful of words there that are going to use those 5 elements I described. So a poster of the 1902 year World's Fair Art Nouveau scene with humans walking in background, cinematic lighting, 70 millimeter. Now, I did a couple of things there that I'm going to talk you through. And I just want to make sure that we're all following what that's happening. And you can see it's going to take about 50 seconds to give me that generation. I am currently in fast mode, but I can switch between fast and relaxed mode in order to speed up my time or to give it a little bit more time. Now, for those of you who haven't used Midjourney before, you are receiving a certain number of what they call fast hours with your membership. That is doing what we saw here, which is a relatively fast generation. If you are trying to do lots and lots of things, but you are a little less time constrained, you can shift into what they call relaxed mode. And then that is, it's charging you a little bit less. And there are certain things that are not as easy to do, but are certainly within your range. Most of us, we save our fast hours for the things that really matter. And then we might use relaxed hours for sort of noodling around on an idea. So, all right. So here's our first generation. I just want to make sure that we're seeing this effectively together. Yes. Okay, great. So you can see I got 4 versions back. I can then pick from those 4 versions to do a number of things. U1, U2, U3, U4, those are upscales. And I specifically asked for a poster. So I want something that looks like a poster, but maybe not something like number 1 that looks like a poster leaning up a thing. Number 2 actually looks like a poster design. So I'm going to go with that one. I'm going to upscale it. And I want to see that larger. Upscaling is taking that original small image, which is like a 256 size pixel, and it's going to give it to me basically double the pixel size, right? So like a 512. And I can upscale again to upscale max is going to give me something over 1,000 pixels. Now, generally in Midjourney, you're going to get to something between 1,000 and 2,000 pixels, depending on the aspect ratios you are working with. You can ask in your queries and your prompts to get to a different aspect ratio. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. I'm also going to do one of these V's for variation here, because the variations are really helpful in terms of seeing a concept, but maybe in a slightly different way. So I want to see variations on number 4, but maybe I'm going to remix it a little bit. A poster, what is a good descriptive word for this poster? I want it to look vintage. So maybe I'll start with that just to see if that helps. And then maybe I'm going to remix a different one as well. Maybe I want to see a few versions of that second one I like. And so I'll hit V2. And maybe in this case, I want a more vibrant palette. So a vibrant, colorful poster. So those descriptor words, in this case, words about the palette, can help refine what I'm getting and really help it maybe get closer to what my original concept was. Now, I think it's pretty fascinating that it put this sort of almost spooky looking vibe on the first one. That wasn't really what I intended. And so I might need to go back in, refine the prompt, and give it something a little bit more detailed to what I'm looking for, right? If it's too vague, it's going to try and fill in the vagueness with something that might surprise you, but something that you might not want. So that is where remixing comes in. And we're going to talk through some of these, but first I want to just bring back our slides and kind of talk you through a little bit of what we're talking about here. So the Imagine prompt, what we just did there, it creates that grid of 4 images. It takes about 50 seconds, and then it's giving you back versions to variate, basically to upscale or to create variations around. There are those elements that were included. We primarily focused on a text prompt there. There were parameters at the end, but they were automatically added. We're going to talk through a little bit more of the detail of what just happened in terms of both the text, the parameters, and then we're going to get to what was at the beginning of some of those prompts, which is an image. It's basically having a reference point that is visual versus a reference point that is all words. So I want you to try this at home. Try writing a prompt where 3 words that don't seem to have something to do with each other, but might be an interesting juxtaposition, that might include a noun and a style word, that might include something evocative as well. So in this case, confused, surrealist, dripping. That gives a lot of room for mystery and for something to surprise you, right? Because there's very little detail there. There's no nouns in this case. When you're thinking about experimentation with Promptcraft, juxtaposition and evocative words can really be a great place to start, because you're going to find things that surprise you and delight you, but you're also going to find things that maybe are interpreted in ways that aren't what you anticipated. So these are some of those examples. Surrealist is a really great place to experiment. When you're thinking about the kinds of style words that might give you something interesting, think about the kinds of art that are interesting to you, right? And then play with those words. Now, I'm going to encourage you at this point not to prompt based on other names of artists. This is something that other people do use and teach. Some tools are really geared for that, but it's perhaps not the best way to form your own style. It might come across as too derivative, and honestly, there are ethical debates on whether that's appropriate. So I personally avoid other people's names, especially if they're living, and I avoid copyrighted material because I don't really want to mess with other people's stuff. So when you're thinking about these kinds of ideas, think about what nails it down for you as an original thought, right? So in this case, I wanted cat gems, and I've been making cat gems since June, but cat gems are sometimes they've evolved, let's say. So I've been making cat gems since the second version of Midjourney. We are now in version 4. And then some of the cat gems that I was able to do in Midjourney, I found were still not quite right. So I was able to make lots of variations, remix, and make a whole collection. In this case, hundreds of cat gems that you can get to on the web. Once I did that, made all of those variations of all the different types of cats that we could see, I could then take my favorite 50 and train a new model so that when I'm making a game, all of the assets are trained based on my art, but they're one step removed at this case from Midjourney. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but honestly, this is an intro level workshop. We're going to kind of leave it at the doorstep of training your own models today, but we do cover that in the advanced topics workshop. So back to those 3 elements and making sure that your parameters, the elements at the end of a prompt in Midjourney, especially where you're seeing those hyphens, those dashes there, those are parameters. They are giving very specific limitations or guardrails or constraints to the algorithm as it is working. So in this case, no farms. I don't want to see any farms in my picture, right? So that's going to be a negating weight. It's going to make sure there are no farms in the generation. You see 2 dashes with IW 0.5. That's an image weight. And we're going to talk a little bit about image weights a little bit later. And then 2 dashes AR32. That is aspect ratio. And for those of you who have worked in graphic design or in video production, all of those things are giving you content that you might be able to then take out to other types of media. For example, for making a background in a video, making aspects of your video game. All of these parameters are what we call algo mods or algorithmic modifiers. So algorithmic modifiers are used to improve the outputs, to really refine and improve what you're getting out of these tools. And they are also going to improve basically everything that leads up to the upscaling process. So Not every tool handles parameters and mods the same way, but there are tools that can help you form them effectively. So it does take some trial and error, and some folks have reported back that they get a fair number of error messages as they're trying these things. So stick with it and try forming it a slightly different way. We're going to talk through some of the tools that you can use if you're struggling with that. I will say Midjourney in particular has all sorts of parameters that are tied to specific versions of the tool. So if you are in the settings, you can go settings to V3, and we're going to go through and how to do this very shortly. Now that I'm back, I'm going to go back to Discord for this. So if you have not changed your settings before, we're going to look at how to do that right now. Here we are in our Discord window where we were making those posters. And let's say I want to try and do something that is not going to work in V4. I'm really excited about maybe this design and this design, but I know that the next stage I want to do is only going to work in V3. So I type the /n settings here. That's going to view and adjust my personal settings with the Discord Midjourney bot. Now, when I say Midjourney bot, this is literally a bot that Midjourney can run in any Discord server. So while I'm in a DM, you could be doing this in your own channel with a few friends. I do have a half a dozen channels where Midjourney bot has been added to our other servers. So these are different ways that you can choose to engage either in small groups, on teams, collectively, or individually. So here I am in the settings. You can see that it allows me to adjust my settings here. And that's really useful for a number of things. You're going to see MJ version 1, 2, 3, 4, and Niji mode, which is going to give you anime effects, which it could be really useful here. We're going to go to MJ version 3 because certain types of things, for example, aspect ratios, image weights, some of those things were not enabled in V4 until very recently, or are still not enabled. So you can see I'm still bringing up generations, but here I've changed from version 4 to version 3. And this changes the parameter. So you can see current suffix, those are those parameters. So it's giving me high quality. High quality is a 2x cost. Which is, if you're paying for each generation in Midjourney, that might be too expensive for you. If you have an unlimited plan, that might be okay. Some of the other things you can toggle here, you can use MJ test photo if you're trying to do photorealism. That might give you a better result. Style very high might give you something more painterly, or might introduce different layers of unexpected chaos as well. There are different types of upscaling. I will say that the upscalers I thought worked very well in version 3, currently are not as effective in version 4. There are also public and private modes here. Again, use those as you need to for your own publishing needs. Remix mode, which I would encourage you to turn on at this point. Remix mode is what brought the window back up so that I could add things to my variation. That is extremely useful for refining and iterating. So I would encourage you to turn on remix mode and fast and relax. As you can see, I can go back and forth and toggle that. I'm going to go to fast mode for the rest of this workshop. So here I am, and maybe I want to try something that is in a different aspect ratio. Aspect ratio is going to be one of those parameters at the end. So let's say I'm going to take this, but I'm going to go to an aspect ratio to 3. And let's see if I formed that right, because I might have needed to put a space right there, right? So let's see if I formed it right. It's going to give me an error message if I didn't. But in this case, it worked. So my aspect ratio, we'll see if it's able to translate that poster to something that is not a square image, but is something that is a poster-sized image, right? Something that would be appropriate for a poster. So that is just a little bit about how the settings work, but also how you might want to toggle your settings in order to try different types of things, especially if you're not able to get to what you're looking for in the current version you're trying. And I'm really starting to see some cool things pop up here. So I'm going to upscale 2 of these. Actually, I'm going to upscale 3 of them because I'm curious what that giant mushroom is in the back. So we're going to dive back into our the rest of our slides here as we go. For those of you who are following along, you can toggle between V3 and V4 or Niji mode or photo mode as much as you need. There's no cost to changing your settings, but you may find that certain versions do better with, for example, aspect ratios. So common aspect ratios, 9:16, 3:2. Some of these are going to be for a cinematic or a landscape. Different types of aspect ratios are normalized, right? So whether you're using a ratio or a pixel count, right? 1920 by 1280 in this case would be a pixel count. But it is going to give you that as a ratio when it's giving it back to you. And yes, we are recording this session. Just for those of you who are jumping in later, we do record these sessions. They go to my YouTube, and then we do provide clips of these for future workshops as well. So we're currently banking a couple of hours of content that can be provided as an asynchronous workshop, as well as the live version. So you're welcome to come back to this material later and part of the Realitycraft group, let's say that properly. The Realitycraft group is specifically to be able to come back to this material and work with it as you're experimenting. I will note that there is a book coming out as well related to these topics, and that ebook is dropping on Feb 1. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other tools and guides out there for you. So this is one that you can go to right now. It is a relatively free, but by donation. So I'm going to encourage you to donate to Shane, who created this tool, prompter guide. And let's see if I can bring that up as a banner for you. You can go to prompterguide.com. And what you're going to find in this case, Prompter Guide has a number of sort of tools and guides, but they have work. And I want to apologize, but I lost all of my windows right before we went live. So I'm going to pull this up again for us. Prompter Guide is a really fascinating little worksheet that you can get into your Google Sheets. Basically, you're going to make a copy into Google Sheets if you're a Google Sheets user. I'm going to bring that up as soon as it's loaded and working smoothly. I think I'm going to need to make it a little bit larger for us so that we're seeing it properly. Okay, great. So let's see. I'm going to stop and bring a different screen in here. Now, thanks for sending in your questions, by the way. I really appreciate it. We are still, let's see. I need to pull this into a separate window so it's going to run easier, I think, for our stream today. There we go. So when you're trying to bounce between these tools, it might feel like it's really daunting. So I want you to give yourself some time to experiment. Number one, when you're thinking about, okay, is this going to be the right tool for me? It might take you an hour or two to get your head around a tool and see whether it's going to work for you. Prompter is basically a way to organize all of the content that we just discussed into a free, open worksheet for yourself. And then you can just keep track of all of your work in one place. I love this when it comes to Midjourney, but also it does work across other sets such as Stable Diffusion. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to use this. And the creator, Shane, I'm going to absolutely encourage you to go to the bottom and donate to Shane at prompterguide.com on Venmo or PayPal if you find that this tool is useful for you. So let's walk through it just a little bit. Make sure that we are bringing up the page here effectively. All right, so you're seeing this Google Sheet, and this Google Sheet is specifically, it's something that you can copy over into your own page, and there's a link at the bottom, and I'm just going to put that right up here one more time. Shane at prompterguide.com is the one who made this. So again, if this is useful to you, just go ahead and please drop him something. When you are organizing, I have found that having a tool like this, whether it's using your own or using this one, is vital, especially if you're trying to do large-scale world building, or you're trying to keep track of maybe dozens, if not hundreds, of prompts for a body of work, let's say a book or a whole film and animation, something like that. So where it has main idea, that is where you're going to start. That's going to be the descriptors. That can be whole clusters of descriptors as well. But you want to express the idea in just a few words. Compassion scene with two people on the street. And in this case, I can give that thing a weight. And we're going to talk a little bit about what weights do later. You can weight an image, or you can weight a concept. And these are all useful when you're trying to help the algorithm decide how much emphasis or how much attention to give to something in terms of all of those elements of your prompt. Okay, so you express the main idea. We're not going to bother with weights yet, but that is useful. Version of algorithm. Now, this is a drop down, and I can see a number of different versions of, in this case, Midjourney. There is a similar version for Stable Diffusion as well. So if you want to skip through, you can check out the Stable Diffusion version. In this case, there are places to put those image URLs. We're going to talk about image prompting in just a few minutes. There are do not includes, right? So do not include farms, do not include, anything that you might not want in your picture, you can say do not include. So notice that I am in version 4B right now, right? And so if I say version 3, certain parameters like tile, HD, all of these sorts of things opened up again. Seed and same seed are extremely useful. For example, if you're trying to create a character with the same look and feel over many different generations. We're going to talk about this more in the advanced topics class. This is something that I'm still exploring when it comes to character design or world building. So that's where you might want to switch between V3, V4, the versions, right? So same seed, for example, tile, HD, and video, not yet available. They're not yet compatible with version 4. So those are parameters that you can toggle and parameters that you might not be able to toggle. You can see certain things here. I can just sort of bring down an aspect ratio. Let's say I want that 3:2. A medium. I like Art Nouveau style. A camera. Do I want a first person view, right? These are point of view words. And those are very useful. Drone view, satellite imagery. All of these are really interesting, right? Lens length. I used 70 millimeter, but you might want to do something, telescopic or up close. Really think about what makes sense for the type of scene and story you're trying to depict. I used cinematic lighting last time, but maybe I want to try that campfire lighting instead. Maybe that, colorscape. Vibrant is a word that I tend to use because I'm looking for vibrancy in a picture, but you can pick, dichromatic, right? Complementary. Pick colors that work specifically for your palette. Now, obviously, there are also color mixes, right? So it can pull from other types of color palettes, right? Obviously, certain styles cyberpunk and all of these things might have specific palettes attached to them. So you can play with that, or you can amp it up. And you might want to use emoji for this, right? So using colors as well in your actual prompt, whether it's the name of a color or just the emoji of a color. So I can, choose a color scape, or I can be very vague about that. I can pick descriptors that make a lot of sense for the type of scene I'm trying to do. Intricate, insanely detailed. These are the kinds of words that are often coded for use with the algorithm to get the best results. Now, I mentioned that I personally don't like to use artist film and games because I'm not trying to build someone else's world. I'm trying to create my own. I do, however, go to lots of these kinds of descriptor words. So rainbow core, anything you might like there. Now, once I'm done filling out all of my aspects of what types of things, right? So I'm going to delete this and say, I want a solarium World's Fair, right? And then I don't want this cluster at all. Now, when I hit save, it's going to want to run a script, and I'm going to let it do that script, because what it's going to do is then take all of those things I just put in and give me something that is going to let me get to what I want. So I have to go to prompter and allow prompter to run those scripts, but then it will basically take an output, right? In this case, it's given me all of that prompt text that I can cut and paste. So, some of this is being automated so that you don't even have to do these kinds of worksheets, but I want you to see what the worksheets look like so that you know how to use them, right? So that's a little bit about prompter. Now I can take that. Let's, bring this back up here. I'm going to bring back my Discord and copy and paste what I just did over to Discord, and we'll see what happens, right? Obviously, your mileage is always going to vary. This is where experimentation matters. So I'm going to, let's see. We have a lot of screens to share today, so I apologize. I am going to be switching screens frequently, and we're going to go back into Discord for a few more minutes. So when we're in Discord, we've got those posters we liked. Maybe I thought that was a reasonable concept, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm going to take what I got out of the other prompter instead. So I'm going to go to that Discord window, and I'm going to just paste what I had before. Now let's see if it formed properly. No, it didn't copy and paste properly. That's not what I want at all. Right? So when you're thinking about how these things work, frequently, we're trying to copy and paste content that may or may not work the way we want it to. So I have to once more copy and paste my content and see if it gets to where I want it to be. There we go. An imagine prompt that makes sense. All right. So let's see what that gave us. This is going to be a different scene. This is not the poster going to the World's Fair that we just did. This is a scene that is a little bit different, but it's giving us something interesting at least. So wanted you to see what we got out of the last scene, right? Some of these are really beautiful. Certainly workable. Now, you would want to take this out into an editing program and then work with these concepts in a way. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to remix a concept, taking maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 images from your previous generations and blending them together. So some of these are very useful, and I think I might want to use them for a broader concept. But I want to see what this gives me first, right? Because this is taking me to a different direction. In this case, I've got a different aspect ratio. So I absolutely got that aspect ratio right. It didn't give me any farms, thankfully. All right. So that's what it gave me based on what we just did in Prompter. So you can see it picked up the teal of that palette that I asked for. It gave me a lot of intricate detail the way I asked for. It took that lens photo piece of the prompt, telephoto lens, and it turned it into what is this here? But that's kind of nice, right? Like if I were trying to do a storyboard or something that might be for a future film project, this might be an establishing shot. So that's where you're wanting to think about how all of these elements might fit together or help inform a story. Obviously, some of these things, while pretty, probably aren't useful. Like this statue holding a flame is unusual, but I'm not sure where I would use it exactly. Whereas something like the fourth scene might actually be useful for some of my storytelling. So that's where you're going to want to think about what things make sense for you to experiment with or remix from. Right. So I probably wouldn't use this image as it stands, but I might mix it with other content that I've already developed. The other thing I can do here is this basically like a re-roll or a regenerate button at the end. That is going to give me 4 new versions. Let's say I didn't like anything of what came out. I can try again. And that's very, very useful for certain types of work. Let me make sure that we are all on the same page together, since we have now traversed half of the web in the last half an hour. We're going to come back into our slides. So that's a bit of how to use these tools like Prompter. And I'm going to stop here to just take a few questions, and we're going to dive into some of your use cases. And big ups to Shane at Prompter Guide. I'm going to put this right up here. Shane, great worksheet. Absolutely love this tool. I think he's doing a fantastic job. We are building currently a GitHub with a wiki that will include that resource and many, many, many others. If you have great resources you want to include for that, send them over this week. The ebook on Promptcraft will be out next week, February 1st. And we would love to include some of these open source resources and guides and free tools that are out there so that anyone can jump in, right? This is the goal here is to help everyone be more creative in what they're doing, right? This is not about reducing creativity. This is about expanding your capacities as a creator. So at the end of the day, if you're trying to figure out, well, is this compromising my own art? Maybe remix your art. Maybe try something new that takes your previous works and tries them in a new way, right? So yes, you can use this to develop wholly new work, whether that's for work or for play, experimentation, storytelling, whatever that might be. But you can also think about how to repurpose your existing work. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that with an image prompt. And image prompts, we were talking a little bit about this and around it when we were talking about Midjourney. We're going to dive into Midjourney one more time because both Midjourney and Stable Diffusion allow for different versions of image prompting depending on which interface you're using. Keep in mind that versions of Stable Diffusion are baked into lots of other programs now. So Stable Diffusion is running under the hood for a handful of design tools. We looked at a tool in one of our previous sessions called Simulacra, which is a 3D WebXR world where you can use Stable Diffusion as well. And I'm going to go ahead and put these kinds of URLs in as well, because I want you to think about how you can try something different. Maybe go to a social place and try generating, and then maybe try it in a couple of different tools to see what you get. So we're going to dive back in one more time around image prompts, because this is a vital part of the image generation process. For example, how do you take existing work and maybe remix multiple images into a single new type of image, or create a whole series of generations around a single scene, a background, a character, anything that you might be developing. So I will say that I find it helpful to work in generative collections. And so when I'm working on an idea, I will often generate sometimes a couple of hundred versions of that Some folks like to stop at 6 or 7 generations or versions, right? So if that's times 4, that would give you at least 25 images to work with. I personally find I like to go at least to 50, 75, 100, because once you are at sort of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th variation, you're starting to get a wider variety of things, and you can do a great deal with training on top of that. So that's where I just want you to think about experimentation, and also think about where you're going to take this work in your own flow from here on out. So I'm going to bring back this board. And we have that cool image that we liked. Some folks, it looks like, having a coffee by a fire on the street, which isn't really realistic, but it's an okay image. Now, every image in Midjourney has a URL. And I can copy by right-clicking. I can copy the image link. Now, that URL is really important because I can also do something where I can give Midjourney an image and copy that URL. So I do that by clicking this plus sign, uploading a file, and then I have to pick an image to give it. Let's give it one of my old cat gems. And there's that image, right? So every image I can click on, and I can get the image link, right? So now I'm going to try forming an image, and we use the same imagine prompt, same generation command every time. This is just a simple command that the bot recognizes to say, okay, I'm going to start a generation. In this case, I'm going to put an image at the front, and I have copied the URL for that bus image up front that I liked. So there's that URL. It has PNG in it. It's going to have PNG or JPEG. Those are the types of images it wants. But let's say in this case, I want to say futuristic, cyberpunk, and maybe I want it to feel, gritty, or to have a different quality to it. I like the vibrancy, but maybe I want something else to be omitted from it. So I'll say, bus. Let's see if the bus disappears. Now, what it's doing is it's taking that image as the reference point, and it's going to give me 4 new versions. I can also include something called an image weight, meaning give it more or less attention to the original image. And I can include up to 5 images at once. So Midjourney can mix 3, 4, 5 images and give me 1 output. That's extremely useful if you're trying to refine a character design, for example, and you're getting close, but you're not quite there. Or you're trying to do what we're doing here, sort of world building. Those iterations can really help you nail down something that feels closer to the look and feel and the world you want. So I can see that as it's generating, it took the colorscape of the original image, but it didn't really take much of the actual scene because I didn't prompt for the words that were in the original scene. I didn't prompt for that sort of compassion scene that was happening by the fire. So all it took was the background, the colorscape, the sort of tone of the original image, right? So if we look at that image right there, you see a lot of those oranges and teals. It might have kept a little bit of the composition in terms of, some of these are centered, but a lot of it did not keep. Now, if I wanted it to stay more faithful to the original image, I can do what's called an image weight. And that image weight is formed in a couple of different ways. But if you were using the prompter guide, you will see that what it's going to do is basically put 2 colons and a number. And that number is going to be between 0.5 and 5. And I believe you can also do negative image weights as well. So these are ways in which, and I'm finding it fascinating, for example, that Number 1 and number 4 in this case are somewhat similar, even though they're quite a bit different from the original image. They do have some of the same sort of tonal qualities, but it's kind of lacking, right? And what I noticed here is that we're still in version 3. And that version 3 matters quite a bit, right? It's got that painterly look, but it doesn't have this sort of photorealism I was hoping for. So let's say I'm going to go back to settings. I'm going to go to V4. And I think I'm going to keep everything else the same. But now I'm going to try something a little bit different. So I want to maybe mix one of these pictures, let's say V2, but I'm going to add the image link from before at the front. So what this is going to do is mix those two images and give me something that's closer to a combo between what was the first image. That one is up here just a little bit. That bus image right there. And this one. So we'll see what that comes up with. Hopefully that's going to keep my two people sort of centered in the shot. Excellent. But I was able to get rid of the bus, and you can see it stayed truer to the to the second image, but it kept some aspects of the other image as well. So these are ways in which you begin to prompt on an image, but also then remix from images. So I kind of like what's going on here. I feel like this is getting closer to what I was hoping for. They're a little too close to the fire, so I might need to tone it down or edit it in some way, but at least I'm getting something closer to what I was hoping for. So that's a little bit about the image prompt and how the image prompt works. As I mentioned, you can put those image weights basically at the end of any image. You can weight different images in different ways, and you can also weight the other aspects of the prompt, the text, for example, more or less than the image. So if you're looking for advanced weights and measures, you may want to try going through the Midjourney documentation. And I've noticed just today that I have the URL wrong in the slide book as well, because they have updated how Midjourney is handling their documentation. But they have a very detailed guide on how to work with these image prompts. Now, you'll see in this example of a portrait of myself in sort of a Star Trek world that some people use the parentheses or the carets and such. You don't need to do that. You can just put the URL in directly. So examples to try, put in the URL you're looking to try. In this case, this is a concept for a public art piece. Try a couple of words. Don't overcomplicate the prompt, because it can become overwhelmed and not give you exactly what you're looking for, right? Keep your words to the sort of spare minimum of what is going to be useful for you to get there. And then add those image weights. And that can be either at the end, and that's 2 hyphens IW, or you can image weight per image by using 2 colons with a number as well. So please note that while these things do work in V3, not everything does work in V4 yet, and that is rapidly changing. So you'll note that week to week, certain opportunities might open up, new aspect ratios, new version opportunities in terms of parameters. So this is where you want to experience, go back and forth, try different things, maybe try something in Stable Diffusion and then go back, maybe try a different tool altogether. So there are many, many different image generation tools out there. All 3 of these tools that we've mentioned in this case, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, and Midjourney, are trained on relatively similar data sets, but not all are. So keep in mind that if you are trying to get to photorealism, you might find that Stable Diffusion model that works more appropriately for your use case might not be giving you the results you're hoping for. For example, it may be trained on a lot of editorial, right? So you're getting a lot of supermodel looking models instead of normal looking people. Some models are sourced primarily based on magazines and the kinds of things that you would find on the web, which isn't necessarily representative of all bodies. If you are trying to get to greater diversity, whether that's of age, of culture, ethnic background, skin tone, all of these things, you may want to try using the test P version, which is that photo version in the Midjourney settings. You can try that. Also, if you are trying to represent someone of a specific background that includes ethnicity or a country of origin, be very specific. You can use the name of the country of origin or the place of origin. You can also use words that are specific to that language. So the word for beautiful in Portuguese might give you someone who represents a beautiful person who would speak the Portuguese language. So that is extremely useful if you're finding that your prompts are not representing the kinds of diversity you're looking for. This is also useful when you're trying to do a whole concept and really develop it out from start to finish. So we're going to talk a little bit about one tool that is specific to Midjourney, which is sending the emoji of an envelope to the bot. And what that does is it delivers to you what is the job ID and the seed. Now, the seed is information that the algorithm uses to be able to reference a whole style guide and tone and come back to it later. So if you are finding that you've nailed down a look and feel that you really like after many variations, you might want to mark down that seed, come back to it, and use it later. And there are a couple of different ways to do that. I'm going to reference you to the Midjourney book for details on how seed and same seed work, because they do slightly different things, but they are very useful when it comes to concept development that is consistent over many generations. So here you can see the job ID and the seed. You can copy and paste those and keep track of them in a place like a prompter guide in a workbook or wherever you choose. If you need tooling for that, we will definitely be sharing those tools in the future as well. So I want you to notice how I have formed this prompt to include lots of commas, because what I'm trying to do in this case is separate out concepts. Those are clusters of words. Those are descriptors. Each of those depicts a different thing in the picture. And I'm trying to depict a poster that tells a big story that has a lot going on here. So I'm using commas effectively to separate each element in the picture, or in this case, the poster design. So I want it to look like a photograph, but it is a poster. So I include both of those words. You know, there are some style words there. There are descriptors. There are adjectives. There are words that are more sort of vague as well, because I want certain things to be conveyed that might surprise or just, you know, give us something new. So that's where using these words effectively can be very, very helpful. All right, so this is where I need to mention that the Midjourney Gitbook is no longer a Gitbook, but if you go to midjourney.com and their documentation, actually, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now because I have it up in another window if I believe I can achieve it. Yes, so the Midjourney documentation is pretty darn fantastic if you're trying to understand what some of those parameters do, for example. That's where you're going to want to get in, dive deep. It is now, it's going to look like this. Explore more topics, using Discord, getting started, and user guide, right? So this user guide specific, right? This is exactly what we were talking about, but it is now at docs.midjourney.com instead of at the Gitbook version. So I'm going to encourage you to take some time on your own to go through what upscalers do, what those commands are. We're talking about Niji in terms of illustrated styles like anime. You might want to look at what the test modes do and how to switch. I absolutely recommend going to the section on parameters. you're going to see that there's a lot of content there. So I realize I don't have, I'm doing a terrible job of screen sharing to you all. So when you are at docs.midjourney.com, you're going to find that it's going to give you guides into using Discord, the user guide itself on versions, parameters, commands, the whole command list, everything that you can tell the Midjourney bot to do, and what those things are going to give you, right? So if you need to sort of manage any aspect of your experience, including your membership with them, that's where you're going to manage it. I hope that piece is helpful. I know not all of you are using Midjourney, but it is sort of a dense tool with a lot of information. Now, if you are finding that you need something a little bit more advanced than Prompt Your Guide, there are tools such as Prompt Locker. Other folks have developed their own ways of cataloging. I have talked to people who are using places like Notion to organize this as well. What is really vital is to keep track of the clusters of words that are most effective to you. And if you are looking for additional language, this slide deck I'll make sure we still have access to within the Realitycraft group. So if you're in the Realitycraft group on Facebook, you're going to be able to get to these slides, and I will do my best to keep these links updated. So within GitHub, that doc particularly is a guide to text prompts to improve the language of style. So if you don't have a background in art history, but you're trying to figure out, well, what is that style called that the artist does? That's a very useful tool. Again, I wouldn't recommend using the artist names, but talk about their style. If you're trying to describe a specific art style, find language for it. Same with this Google Doc, which is an open doc of styles. That is going to give you a lot of language that may not be familiar to you, but might be familiar to someone from a different background, let's say a cinema director or a graphic designer. So there are so many terms that are useful in graphic design. We like to play around with ideas, for example, knolling, K-N-O-L-L-I-N-G. When you use that word in a prompt, it lays out all of the things, all of the elements. It's a particular type of layout in your format. There are so many different types of obscure art styles that are used in pottery or in 3D design and sculpture, things like that, that can be translated into the 2D via Midjourney or Stable Diffusion as well. Some of you have noticed that I do this quite a bit with stained glass and other types of things that are cost prohibitive to build in the physical world. This is also useful, though, for concept development, for example, as you saw with the public art project of a large-scale sculpture that would happen in a park. It helps to have lots of different potential versions to look at before making a decision. Finally, there are great videos out there from, I would say, at least half a dozen amazing YouTubers. I have talked to the guy at Airtime Art recently, Steve. He's very smart. He's built a tool called the Loom. If you're trying to do graphic novels, you might want to jump onto his Kickstarter. We're going to be looking at a couple of examples next from another YouTuber, Olivier Sakis. And then there are a few others I will say that are quite good. Prompt Muse is one that I enjoy quite a bit as well. So if you're trying to get a little bit more detail on how to get through a whole publishing workflow, let's say you're trying to figure out how those seeds work or how to go from a concept to a finished book product, all of these folks have fantastic videos on that. And we also do cover that in the new book. The book will be out on February 1st. So this is Olivier Sarkis, and from his YouTube, specifically, he mentioned a couple of interesting styles that I'm just going to bookmark here as things you can try later. I want you to notice how he's forming the prompt, because so much of what we're doing in this space is riffing on other people and learning from each other. So when he says house from the 1929 year, obviously that's not how normal like English grammar works. We wouldn't say that in a sentence. But what that tells the algorithm is to focus on making a house, number one, and that 1929 is the second most vital piece of information there. right? What is 1929? It's a year. There's not 1929 houses, right? It's a year. So he has to specify that that's a year. But what that does is it very clearly depicts a house that would have been made in 1929, but in the style of an isometric illustration. Now, from there, you can take hundreds of these and make a game board, because if you're trying to make an isometric game board, you take hundreds of those assets and bring them together. There you go. So that is how the sort of lightweight way in which some of these things can be combined and then brought into different concepts. Obviously, that's very applicable in games, not going to be applicable for other types of things. But let's say you're trying to do a blog post, you might want to try and do something like this where it's typography art. So specifically on the Promptcraft side, what he's doing first is describing the scene. What is the format, right? Who is in this picture? It's a young, handsome man. Then what type of picture is it? It is typography art. Now, when you're trying to do this at home, I want you to try and think about these 5 elements in your prompt. Midjourney can realistically use about 50 words. But it is giving the most weight or attention to the words at the front. So it's really reading the first 10 words, and then it's going to reference the rest of the stuff occasionally. So what this means is if something is really important to your picture, you need to put it at the front. You need to put it in those first 10 words so that even without a weight, even without any sort of signifier or parameter, it understands that this is the most important thing. If you're thinking about Promptcraft in terms of describing a scene that might be multidimensional, start with the focal point or the sort of center of attention, and then work your way to the background. If you were, thinking about that in sort of cinematography terms, you might describe a scene at the top of a scene, starting with what you want the camera to notice first, right? What is in focus? So that is where you really want to spend your time in terms of your Promptcraft and how to form these prompts effectively so that you're getting what you want. And anything else is extraneous, and get rid of it. And that includes articles, that includes the word very is never useful. Certain types of extraneous words are going to just get in the way. So think about trying to form your prompt using 10 to 20 words max. Keep in mind that some versions of Stable Diffusion are really only reading the first 10 words, while other prompting tools, and this is in text as well as in image, are going to be able to read something closer to 50. So length matters, but also where you put things also matters, right? So syntax and grammar are also going to be a part of this puzzle. I think ChatGPT is what crashed my system earlier. So we're going to try it again, and let's see if it's going to let me log back in. Because when I came here a little while ago, everything crashed. Now, ChatGPT has been obviously receiving an incredible amount of attention. It's been all over the news over the last few days. What this has led to is real proliferation of people using it for a wide variety of things. So I think I can screen share from that now. Let's make that happen. It looks like ChatGPT is currently working. But, okay. Let's see if I can get it to do it without crashing everything. Because what we have seen so far is ChatGPT goes up and down frequently. And I think this is primarily an issue of demand on their front. So many of you who've been following the news have noticed that ChatGPT, which came out for the public in December, has hit sort of a fever pitch right now in terms of people using this tool for a wide variety of things. What you will see on the left-hand side are the chats that I have already tried to prompt it to do, there are certain types of things that it is really good at and certain types of things that it is terrible at. So we're going to talk just a little bit about both of those quickly. ChatGPT is very good at writing simple nonfiction, like a technical thing. It can write code. It can describe things in simple terms. What it is not good at include things like current events, because this model is going to be based on something that would have happened in 2021. It is outdated. So it's not going to know the news up to today. I also have found that it is not necessarily able to understand certain types of nuance, right? So in this case, I asked this tool, ChatGPT, to explore how diffusion models, so Midjourney and these art tools, are facing challenges on topics like copyright, intellectual property, and fair use of art and media. Now, obviously, some of this is more newsworthy right now, and this model, this tool, might not have the right or most relevant information. So accuracy is going to vary in ChatGPT. You cannot assume that it is accurate. It is based on what it is pulling from the web, and it may or may not be accurate. There are a couple of different ways to prompt ChatGPT. What I just asked it to do is to regenerate a response. Now, when you add something, a new chat, it is going to generate a response for the first time. Frequently, the first thing you get is not very good. And so you might have to go a couple of times. This is where I found it helps to sometimes cut and paste and edit and pull out a sentence that you like here and a sentence you like there, or a way of organizing the information that you like, but maybe change almost everything about what's written. So what you're noticing here is it's sort of writing at somewhere between a high school and a college freshman level. It is certainly able to do like a book report, but it is not going to necessarily be great at making comparisons across fields or making a really great illustration of something, or why, understand why it's important, understand why something is relevant. So nonfiction, you are going to be able to get quite a bit out of this tool. I would also encourage you to try other tools like Jasper AI, Copy AI. I'm also testing a few others on the back end from Runway, Augie, AugX Labs. These are tools that you can consider for writing copy, writing scripts, and you know, if you're trying to get your videos, get your voiceover written quickly, that kind of thing. So yes, these tools are useful. Let's talk a little bit about the Promptcraft. We don't have to use the imagine prompt here. We can start a new chat and just do something very simple. And there are certain types of words it really likes, right? So it's good at ideation and making a list. It's good at explaining some things. But I also want it to maybe tell me step by step, how do you write a great prompt for ChatGPT? Step by step is one of those tools that we use in order to get it to be more effective at creating simple step-by-step guides. This is often a good way to get the content to be more specific and more useful. Obviously, I may not want to use all of this, but I might want to copy and paste this, edit it, reframe it, and then put it in the book, for example, right? So these are ways in which you can begin to develop certain types of content beds that are going to work with the rest of your work. All right, I think we have about 5 minutes left. I know that we got to most of those questions, but not all. There was one around copyright. Are prompts copyrightable? No. Think of prompts more like language itself. You can't necessarily copyright. You can trademark a turn of phrase, for example, but you're not going to copyright like a sentence. Like that doesn't work. It's not the way copyright works. So you can copyright certain types of finished works. However, I will say that there was a graphic novel published using generators in December, and I believe its copyright was revoked. So whether those copyright rules are going to stand, and they're likely to be rewritten. So we don't know the answer to this long term. And are there generative art detectors, such as those identifying what is written with ChatGPT? Yes. So a generative art detector, they're a little bit different. One thing you can use is Have I Been Trained? And Have I Been Trained is one that will specifically allow you to enter your own images and see if they've been remixed into other people's works and art. That is not to immediately tell you whether this was created in Stable Diffusion or Midjourney or anything like that. Those kinds of tools are still sort of in development. There are also, as I mentioned earlier, both opt-in and opt-out tools. So the folks who made Have I Been Trained have also been building tools that support artists in having their work removed. For example, from the next version of Stable Diffusion, version 3, Stable Diffusion 3 will allow for artists to opt out. That ability to opt out is important for some creators. Opt in, meaning I want my work to be included in the model and I might want to receive value in exchange for that. Those models are still being developed. The tools around them are in the early stage. I don't know that we're going to see those right away, but we're going to see them eventually because there is value proposition. We're also seeing artists that are making their own generators off their own work, which is certainly a valid way to, build an app on your existing art. Certainly a handful of artists now have figured out that they can make their own generators. Anyone can do it. There are lots of great tools out there. We don't cover those in this workshop, but we will be covering some of that in the advanced topics. So if you're interested in exploring advanced topics, I'm going to encourage you to jump into what we're doing in the Realitycraft group. And also hit me up at evo.ist, especially if you're trying to sort out how this fits into your workflows. So this is a book that I finished in about a week in September using Midjourney v3 and Snapfish. Now, lots of print-on-demand solutions exist out there, but you can absolutely go from first generation to print and have something in hand in 2 weeks. So this was an experiment that I was able to run in a very lightweight way. It cost under $100 to do. I had multiple books in hand, and then I was able to sell those books. So that's how this works, and that's how you can begin to create bodies of work that are then valuable and do something more with the creative work that you're already creating. So if you need support on how to take this work from concept into world building, that's what we do here at Realitycraft in Oakland. You can schedule a session at evo.ist. We can try a design lab, either live or remote. I do those, hybrid as well as physical. And then we can certainly talk about producing, publishing, and I work on collaborative projects with a wide variety of studios, producers, agencies, and different creators across the board, both in the AI and tech space, but also in media and storytelling. So if you need support on that, just hit me up. Those creative design labs are up to you. Also, use the Realitycraft group on Facebook if you need experimental support. That includes how this fits into Metaverse, XR, all of these other types of workflows that you might be working on. And if you need support on bringing this tool into your specific workplace, as I mentioned, the ebook will be out on this February 1. I don't know why I keep saying December. The ebook on Promptcraft will be out on February 1st. And with that will be this workshop in a more detailed way for teams internally inside companies. So if you are looking for that level of workshop with your team, we can talk about that. You can go to evo.ist. So I hope you're going to take this work out there and try new things, whether you're trying to do something in concept development for a physical product or you're trying to do something in storytelling. Please let me know where you are hitting those gaps, where you are hitting questions. Bring those to the Realitycraft group on Facebook, where that group can help answer those questions and we can help solve for those things together. And I hope you'll reach out. Here's my contact info, Evo at Playable Agency, if you need to schedule something with me directly. And I hope that you've received some value out of today's workshop. We're going to be wrapping up in just a moment, but thank you for coming and for being a part of today's flow. I'm going to bring our music right back up, and please reach out if I can support you in any way. This has been Promptcraft 1, and coming to you live from Realitycraft in Oakland, California. Please let me know where I can support your work in the future. And if you are trying to create something new, please reach out. I am Evo Heyning, and this has been a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being a part of this workshop.